Once again, welcome everyone. Good afternoon, everyone, on this webinar on methodologies and database technology solutions for improved European mobility. As mentioned, this session will be, of course, recorded. This webinar is organized by the MobiDataLab project and supported by Senior, so Big Data++ and the Reciprocity project. Also to mention that this is a professional webinar setup. So if you're wondering why you cannot change your camera or if you cannot speak, it's because only panelists and speakers are allowed to do so. Once we go to the general Q&A session, you will be able to raise your hands and ask your questions in the Q&A session. And of course, you will be permitted to speak. That being said, we also have 4 amazing speakers today with us from 4 different innovative projects that are funded by the European Union. On behalf of MobiDataLab, we have the coordinator Thierry Chevalier. On behalf of SynAir project, we have Ismini Strumpu. On behalf of So Big Data++ project, we have Luca Papalardo. And from the Reciprocity project, we have Marcel Romšić. So also briefly to mention today's agenda. After this welcome and introduction, we will switch to the MobiDataLab's transport cloud solution and more information on the project itself. It will be followed by the SynAir technology solution. After that, we will have a technology solution presented by the So Big Data project, and afterwards a nice project methodology by the Reciprocity project and what an amazing things they also do. We encourage all the speakers to have around 12 minutes of presentation and to leave time for at least 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Any unanswered question, or if you want to think about the solution or about the methodology, feel free to do so, to write it down in the Q&A session. And when we reach that point of the agenda, we will answer all your questions and resolve all your doubts regarding either the methodologies or technology solutions. This being said, I would like to stop sharing my screen and give the floor to Thierry, that is going to present the MobiDataLab's transport cloud. Thierry, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Daniel. So let me share my screen. I hope you can see it.
Not yet.
Should be okay now.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, good. So thank you very much, Daniel and Diana, for organizing this session. I'm very happy to present you the MobiDataLab approach to methodology and database solutions for improving mobility. So a word about MobiDataLab. MobiDataLab is a EU-funded project which started last February 2021 and will last until February 2024, and gathering a European-wide set of partners with different skills and backgrounds, and who work commonly on shared project objectives. I personally work for ACODIS, formerly known as ACA, which is a partner of the project and also coordinating the consortium. So what are the shared objectives we have? So just a list here. MobiDataLab aims to assess the mechanisms to enhance data sharing in the transport sector in order to know how to improve the findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability of mobility data. This can be grouped in what we call a knowledge base that we would like to make it open. Besides that, another aim of the project is to prototype a scalable cloud solution for sharing mobility data in order to showcase the most effective means to access and exchange mobility data. This can be grouped into what we call the transport cloud prototype, which is a second outcome of the project. Other objective is to gather representatives of mobility data providers and consumers in order to conduct innovation sessions to co-create, explore, experiment using data as a tool and open data preferably and also the transport cloud prototype. This is what we call the living and virtual labs. So for once, I will start with the last one, living and virtual labs, because everything we do before aims to be used in this context and also to be adapted in the second step. So what we call living and virtual labs in the context of MobiDataLab is basically 3 events. A hackathon, a datathon, and what we call a codagon, which is like a hackathon lasting for several weeks. This method for improving mobility through data sharing relies on two types of actors. The first one is data providers, which are gathered by Police, our partner, consortium partner Police, which is a network of cities and regions working for innovation in transport. And besides that, F6S, which is a network of SMEs and startups, which will enroll data users to participate in the living and virtual labs. So on the side of data providers that will be asked to provide challenges, we have a reference group of mobility stakeholders. So for the time being, we have municipalities like Rome, Eindhoven, Milan, Malaga, Trikala, which is a small city in Greece, and Brussels and Leuven in Belgium, and also regions like the land of Baden-Württemberg in Germany. And also beyond Europe, we have the New York State Department of Transport. So this will result in 3 different events very concretely, which will be held next year, starting with a datathon next May 2023. Then followed by a hackathon in September 2023, and then to end the year, and this will be the final event of the project. There will be this codagon lasting for several weeks. So what is the difference between these several types of events? These events are characterized by different outcomes, different participants, and different types of use cases that we will be working on. The datathon is quite broad in terms of in skills and participation. We want just people to get familiar with the data sets, with the challenge, mobility challenges faced by transport stakeholders, in order to create data analytics, reports, graphs, and proposals. In the hackathon, we will ask developers and data engineers to work on development and testing of new software and create digital tools for instance, journey planning apps or improved time of arrival and all the rest. So what is a mobility challenge? Because we are asking participants in this datathon and hackathon to take up on new challenges proposed by transport stakeholders. So here we reference a group of mobility stakeholders, which are local and regional authorities. I gave the list a few slides before, and whose role is to provide challenges corresponding to concrete mobility problems that data analysts and data analysis, visualization, and enrichment may help to solve. Sorry, can you see my screen still?
Yes, we can see your screen, however, it's not in the presentation mode.
Okay, so I just, okay, sorry, thank you. So we have an initial set of mobility challenges, like the use cases for operations, optimization of transport flow and ETA, emission reporting, analytics and learning, improvement of journey planning, and mobility as a service. We're also having use cases for research, inclusive transport, like sustainable transport and linked open data. These are the initial challenges that we identified in the beginning of the project related to the consortium. But yet we can extend this preliminary set of use cases to other concrete mobility challenges, for instance, trying to assess let's say, objective criteria for creating new traffic lanes or new cyclist lanes, maybe try to assess the problematics or the points of conflicts between cyclists, pedestrians, and larger vehicles, for instance. Also improving the mobility of tourists in very touristic places. These kind of challenges, which are all collected during interviews with the mobility authorities. So in the context of the virtual lab, or let's say the hackathon hackathon, what we propose to organize is to have data consumers able to discover data sets through the virtual lab UI, select a mobility challenge in a given area proposed by the challenge providers, and to process the data. Process the data meaning combining data sets, performing data analysis, and design innovative solutions based on this data. And finally, being able to publish and share the results. This is what we call a use case diagram for the virtual lab. Based on this use case diagram, or let's say archetypic use case for the virtual lab, we were able to define requirements. So first of all, having an interface for the data consumers to be able to access the data and process it, and then providing access to data catalogs, or let's say metadata catalogs, service catalog, data access through whether APIs or through desktop and SaaS software. Also provide access to processors, functions, and libraries, and anonymization methods. So starting with metadata catalogs, a previous preliminary analysis we performed on the list of generic catalogs available in the market and which were used by the public transport authorities at a given time. So there are three mainly used solutions, which are CCAN, Socrata, and OpenDataSoft. We can see that, for instance, in the reference group, CCAN is used by Rome, Milan, Malaga, Trikala, Timișoara, etc. Whereas Socrata is mainly used in North America context, for instance, by the New York State, and OpenDataSoft being used by Eindhoven, Brussels, Toulouse. Besides that, we have also specific georeference data catalogs, which is GeoNetwork. One of the main work we are conducting in the making all these data available and findable for data participants is what we call metadata harvesting, which means automatically creating catalogs from already existing catalogs available in the open data portals. So we can see here that the challenge is that we have very heterogeneous landscape of solutions, some of them being non-geographic, some other geographical, and some of them dedicated mainly to public transport. So this is automated through a daily process, which helps us making this data available to participation in datathon or hackathon. Besides data catalog, we also have service catalogs, which means that not only data is available for exploring data sets, but also services, for instance, routing services, geocoding services, traffic services, etc. Again, this is something we are working on for proposing to the participants in the innovation session access to a wide set of APIs. For instance, OpenStreetMap APIs, Navicia, HERE developers, etc. A word regarding interoperability, which is the ability for exchanging data, speaking a common language. So the thing is that data are currently highly interoperable and highly standardized. There are a lot of standards for mobility data. For instance, in public transport, the transmodal standards or de facto standards like GTFS and GTFSRT. There is also in a context of new mobility standards for bike sharing and e-scooters and road traffic data like DATEX2. Besides that, we have also standards for metadata, data on the web, semantic web, and linked open data and spatial data. This is something that we provide support to, which is will be used by the participants in order to combine and mix data sets upon their will. But what is a bit let's say we need more work today is the interoperability of services. I'm taking here the example of mobility services. This is a comparative analysis that have been done by our partner here. We can see that, for instance, for the journey planning and routing services, we have, let's say, a lack of interoperability in terms of requests and responses, and which may pose problems that we are striving to resolve at the current time. Regarding data access, during Mobility Data Hackathon, we propose to provide access to desktop and software as a service tools like MobiDataLab, QGIS, PostGIS, plus also adapt to participants' preferred tools. And also we plan to have service APIs like Navicia, which is the Kizio Journey Planner open source, plus on-demand services, which are the one listed on the MobiDataLab catalog. We also propose data processors for the semantic enrichment of mobility data, which means being able to add complementary dimensions to trajectories, representing various types of semantic information like stops, moves, weather, traffic events, and points of interest. And we also propose a geographical enrichment of data, for instance, to enrich journey planner information with additional data coming from other sources. In particular, think about OpenStreetMap data, which can be used to, for instance, adding quality information related to accessibility of bus stations, or weather information coming from GeoJSON Plain API, and these kind of things. These data processors will be mainly used in the context of the hackathon, where we ask participants to code new solutions and contribute to open source solutions. Finally, we also propose data anonymization methods, which is particularly relevant in the context of sharing privacy sensitive information in a safe way. So our partner, the University of Tarragona in Spain, proposed 3 methods for anonymizing trajectories. Swap locations, which is permuting the location in trajectories among other trajectories. Swap mob, which is swapping segments of trajectory with other trajectories. And microaggregation, which correspond to partition the data sets into disjoint clusters and aggregate by replacing them with Centroid. So this results in what we call the transport cloud architecture, which is a federation of cloud services proposing all these tools and methods to the hackathon participants and datathon participants. So all this information is available as public deliverables on the website of the MobiDataLab project, which is available on mobidatalab.eu/publications. And I would strongly advise and invite you to have a look at these deliverables. As a key takeaways and a conclusion for me, at this stage of the project, I have to say that improving mobility data sharing with the European level in mind is more complex because there are different languages. It sounds trivial, but it is not. Metadata translation is still a subject. Different contexts, geographical, societal, legal, commercial, etc. And sometimes different softwares. We can see that journey planners are not the same depending on the country. And metadata catalogs is the same. We see that, for instance, Socrata is used in North America, whereas SICAN is more used in Europe. There is still a long way to go for making mobility data fair, which means findable, accessible, and interoperable. The lack of service interoperability is still problematic, in particular for journey planners, which is the building block for mobility as a service. And it is a problem not being able to switch from one to the other very easily. Also, solutionism should be avoided. What is solutionism? Sorry, it's providing a solution to user before their true problem has been identified, but yet scalability, replicability, and sustainability must be anticipated. So that's it for me. I hope I was not too long. And thank you very much,
Thierry. I think we have time for one question from the audience or even from the panelists. In case you are in the audience and you would like to ask a question, as Diana mentioned in the chat, feel free to write your questions in the chat or in the Q&A session, or if possible, raise your hand if you want to have the permission to speak. We will have, I think, time for one question, or if you would like to keep time for the Q&A session, it is also mostly welcome, but we encourage you to write questions in the Q&A session so we can answer them later on. All right, then I think that we'll have a nice Q&A session later on. Thierry, thank you very much for letting everybody know about the hackathons and codagons, but also more information regarding the transport cloud itself. I would like now to hand over the floor of this webinar to Ismini from Syn-Air project to let us know more about the technology solution that they have developed within the project. Ismini, the floor is yours. Please share your presentation.
Just let me.
Yes, we can see your screen, and now we can see also your presentation in the slideshow mode. Floor is yours. Thank you.
So thank you for inviting me. As Thierry mentioned, I think that data is the new gold, as they say. So I'm, as the coordinator of Syn-Air Exploratory Research Project, I'm going to present you the concept that we have created. Syn-Air started 2 years ago, and it's going to be finalized by the 31st of December of this year. So let's assume that Joanna wants to travel from Barcelona to Brussels, and she wants to have a door-to-door similar journey. She has a travel companion, and she chooses to take the train, then to catch her flight, and afterwards she takes the bus to go to her final destination. The ideal situation would be to have a single ticket at a reasonable price, real-time information while traveling, low waiting time at the interchanges, and also reaccommodation in the case of disruption. This means that the transport service providers need to collaborate and agree on certain aspects to share data about schedules, Joanna's ID, and assistance if she's a person with reduced mobility. They also need to agree on a certain pricing scheme, revenue sharing, and also responsibility sharing, again, as we said before, in the case of disruption. And here comes Syn-Air solution. Syn-Air solution is to allow TSPs to collaborate in a simple and effective way by using what we call a smart contracts framework. What is the smart contract framework? It's a business process that defines the data exchange rule among TSPs that share a common goal of getting the passenger from A to B through a multimodal chain of trip. To do that, we have created a centralized hub for contracts management, which is be done by the Syn-Air platform that allows the TSPs to manage their contracts, meaning to create them, modify them, terminate them, and validate them. And what we mean by contracts, we mean both data sharing agreements and smart contracts. The most important thing of this concept is that the data of the transport service providers are not stored into the Syn-Air platform, and all the data sharing processes are executed outside of the platform. This scheme presents the actors that interact within the smart contracts framework. So we have two different TSPs that they are willing to collaborate, and they can. And we also have a travel companion, which can be a web or a mobile application that interfaces with the traveler. So the traveler never has access to the Syn-Air platform. So the two TSPs, in order to create a contract, they need to follow a certain a certain process. First of all, they need to sign to the platform. Then we have the step of onboarding, and on onboarding, they need to create their data catalog. Then we have the step of discovery, so to identify which collaboration can be established based on the data and the services of each data service provider. Then we have the negotiation part, which is a time-consuming, and we hope to facilitate it by providing certain templates to the transport service providers. And finally, we have the settlement of the data sharing agreements and or a smart contract. And finally, the post-settlement, which we need to connect the contract with the travel companion platform, a MAS platform, and also create the dashboards for the two transport service providers. And we also, of course, have other functionalities within the platform, the modification and the termination of the contract. In the first step, the step of registration, the TSPs have to agree on the general terms and conditions, which means that they have to agree on the rights and obligations for processing the data being shared by the means of data sharing agreements, and also give the essential rights to the persons that are going to use the platform. We need to have two end users of the platform, one administrative representative and one technical representative, in order to create the catalog of the organization. This is a general scheme of the onboarding. So we envision that the senior platform can be connected with different data spaces, existing data spaces, with asset managers, and also a data transformation platform, which is essential because we need standardization and quality of the data. And then the most important thing is to create the seniors catalog of catalog and to pass to the next step, which is the discovery. So in order to create the discovery, we have already done some preliminary work. We have identified all the data that are generated by the stakeholders per mode, per transport chain. And we created a model. This model is composed by data flow diagrams, and I'm going to present you one in my following slide. These are the three chains that we have identified and explore during the project. So this is the matchmaking mechanism. As you can see, I took as an example the example of the choice of Joanna. She chooses the metro, then the airplane, and the bus. On the horizontal axis, we have the actors that are participating per mode and the data that they generate. And on the vertical axis, we have the trip chain actors. So the idea of senior platform is to, first of all, identify the services per TSP, and then match the different data sets in order to accomplish one objective that will allow Joanna to have a seamless transport. As each actor has different data sets, we have identified some objectives. So as you can see, synchronization of timetables, optimization of resources, single ticketing, disruption recovery plans and real-time updates, reduce waiting times, reduce number of cars on the access roads of an airport or a port, increase car sharing. These are all objectives of data sharing agreements. This is the negotiation phase. So based on the two actors that are willing to collaborate, we create a template first of all, and then we allow them through the platform to exchange their ideas and form the data sharing contract and their smart contract. This whole process is based on the FIPA protocol, and it seems simplistic, but it's a time-consuming and energy-consuming process to be established. So let's assume that the two TSPs are in an agreement, and the next step is to, of course, sign the contract. Concerning the contracts, I mentioned two different types of contract. The first type of contract is the data sharing agreement, which we envision to be an e-contract that defines the data sets that the data provider TSP makes available to the data consumer and set out the terms and conditions of the use of such data. The smart contracts, on the other hand, are based on the external smarter contract model, and they have two parts, the legal part and the software part. The software part is also divided to the data manipulator and the action calculator. The data manipulator is the code that activates and triggers the data sharing, and the action calculator activates the operational consequences linked to the data use. And here is the explanation of a trigger and an action in a different in the context. But to understand better how it can look like, I have an example, and the example is the example of the single ticketing. Here we have the legal part and the software part. So the two TSPs are called during the negotiation step to align their point of view on what needs to be done and when. So write these clauses that are highlighted red. This allows the TSPs to know when they need to share certain data and under which conditions this data should be shared in order to reassure GDPR, in order to reassure that the passenger has certain rights and also has a seamless trip. And the last step is the post-settlement and monitoring of the agreements. As you can see here, we have two monitoring dashboards, the dashboards of the TSPs and the connection of the contract with the travel companion interface. The dashboards have the databases of data sharing agreements and contracts per each TSP. Also, they have the monitoring actions and some statistics that they need to have. They have a communication channel in order to agree on certain aspects if the system has a failure or if they want to notify each other for a certain aspect of the contract. The next steps and conclusion concerning SINAIR. As I said before, SINAIR is an exploratory research project, so The smart contracts framework that I have presented is a co-created concept with the transport service providers and mobility stakeholders. So, so the next step is actually to implement this concept and make it from TRL 1 that it is now, or let's say TRL 2, to make it in TRL 6 or 7. We have identified that, of course, to perform each step will provide a lot of added value to the data sharing processes and also a better experience to the traveler. So, as I said before, the next steps are to develop and test Syner's platform, to test and assess the platform by translating real data sharing contracts, and for example, between an airline, I missed the name, and a railway operator, and upgraded also these data sharing contracts to a smart contract in order to monitor better the activities of data sharing. And also this will demonstrate to the TSPs that the data sharing can unlock different opportunities and improve a lot the traveler's experience. Also, our intention is to engage and use results for other initiatives, such as MobiDataLab, Data for PTs, CatenaX, SnapCore, that are quite related with the process that I have explained. And of course, our main objective and next step should be to achieve seamless door-to-door transport with collaboration in all levels. Yeah, as I was listening to Thierry, I had modified my last slide on how MobiDataLab can collaborate with this framework. So I have identified that on the onboarding step, we can make use of the knowledge base created by MobiDataLab. Also, we can connect the Syner platform with the service catalog of MobiDataLab, which will be extremely useful for us in order to create the catalog of catalogs of Syner. We can also use the knowledge base and mobility data sharing standards of the MobiDataLab deliverables on the creation of the smart contracts. And of course, in the negotiation part, data sharing businesses and revenue models would be quite useful for the establishment of the agreements. And finally, the data processors of the MobiDataLab can be used for the contracts monitoring and to provide added value to the actions that will be performed by TSPs for monitoring the contracts. So that's all from my side. If you have any questions, I don't know if we have time now or afterwards. I try to be quick.
Thank you very much, Ismini. We do have some questions, but I think it is, as you said, better to leave it for the Q&A session. So we are mindful of time of the other presenters as well, and of course everyone's participation here. So thank you very much, Ismini. It was a super insightful presentation on Syner that also sparked some questions, so that we were looking forward to have you. And there's also one question that I would like all the speakers to have an answer on, that comes from Johannes. Okay, thank you very much, Ismini. And now we are moving to Luca. So Ismini, if you'd be kind to stop sharing the presentation so Luca can start.
Okay. You can see my slide, right?
No, we need Ismini to stop sharing the presentation.
Okay.
Just in a second.
Okay.
Yeah, so Luca, if you can change now.
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay, great.
Floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me put just a timer. Okay, so first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. Very glad to participate. I am here to represent So Big Data, which is a European research infrastructure that I, together with many other colleagues, are building in the context of several European and Italian projects. In particular, So Big Data research infrastructure focus on what we call social mining, to understand and model complex social phenomena of different nature that can be societal debates, online social media debates, human mobility, as well as migrations, artificial intelligence and its impact on society, and so on and so forth. What is social mining? Well, social mining can be considered as a toolbox aimed at understanding and modeling complex social phenomena, and also how these social phenomena evolve in time. To this purpose, we combine data-driven, model-driven, and also simulation-driven analytical approaches in order to provide some tools to perform also what-if analysis, for example. Now, all the research that we perform in So Big Data is organized in what we call exploratories, which are vertical contexts of when we perform actually some kind of research. There are several ones. Some of them are already active. Others will be activated are being activated or will be activated in the near future. For example, there is one exploratory on societal debates and misinformation, on demography and economy, on social impact of AI, on sports, and others will be activated, such as network medicine, disaster response, industrial impact of new generation networks, and so on. Regarding human mobility, in particular, we have two exploratories that are linked to the theme, and they are the Sustainable Cities for Citizens Exploratory and the Migration Studies Exploratory, in the context of which we study mobility in the context of the urban environment, or also among different urban environments, countries, regions, and so on. Just to give you some insights of the activity done in the infrastructure about these topics, we, for example, study how to model, how to create better models for flow generation, that is to simulate how many people move from one place to another. Also, what we do is to some mobility analytics for official statistics. How can you use mobility data, such as mobile phone records, GPS traces, and so on, to improve and corroborate official statistics like demographic statistics, for example. Also, we study the relationship between human mobility and COVID-19 and the impact of AI mobility apps that are typically based on AI on the urban environment in terms of traffic, pollution, and so on. Similarly, for the migration studies, what we study is how to detect migration from social media, that can be Twitter, Facebook, or other sources, and how to measure international migration and friendship, again, typically by using social media or some other data sets, like, for example, LinkedIn professional information. Actually, who are the users of the So Big Data research infrastructure? Well, actually, we have a multidisciplinary panorama. The stakeholder that typically use our services that I'm going to show in a while, are typically researchers, 30%, and industries. But also we have policymakers, we have journalists, non-profit organization, public administration, and the general public. The application of our research and services are typically in computer science, but also economy, humanities, law, and so on. So we are building a very multidisciplinary panorama, both in terms of the users of our research infrastructure and the application of the service that we produce every day, every year. A particular aspect that is very important for us is responsible data science. Indeed, all the material we produce, data sets, methods, and so on, try to comply with the fair and fact principles. So to create a responsible data science culture, this is another purpose we have. Actually, we also produce guidelines and white papers related to big data and AI, so to foster the ethical aspect of social mining. What are the services we provide? Well, many. We can distinguish them into open science tools and people and facilities. Regarding open science tools, what we provide is these virtual research environments, which are the area dedicated to users where they may share information. Also, we provide some workspaces and also an interactive programming environment where people can exploit some methods that we developed and use for their purpose. And also we have a very large catalog of all the data sets, methods, applications, and experiments produced that can be also downloaded in some cases, or can be accessed on site by making specific requests to the infrastructure. In terms of people, if some data set, method, or whatever is not directly downloadable, for example, for ethical aspects, we opened the transnational access, which is an initiative through which people can ask to develop a project, go on site in one of the several institutions that compose the infrastructure and perform their experiment and take the results back. This is a visualization of the catalog we have. In the catalog, we have data sets, methods, and they can be publicly accessed. And this is, for example, another service that we have, that is the programming environment. So a user can choose a particular, it's like Google Colab, right? But open to everyone and much more open source, let's say. So in the context of, with data, what we produce is, for example, one library for human mobility, that is Seged Mobility, which is a Python library based on several different standard libraries now, both geographic and scientific libraries. For example, the library provides a way to represent a trajectory as a data frame based on pandas, or to represent flows as a pair of structures that are the flow data frame, which is an origin destination matrix, and a tessellation which describe all the places, the locations that compose the territory. For example, this is a visualization of the data in a trajectory data frame, which is composed by an identifier of a user, a date time, and then of coordinates. And in a few lines of code, it is possible to upload a trajectory into this data structure. Also, there are several functionalities to pre-process data. We know that mobility data are typically noisy and incomplete, so some pre-processing is needed. For example, in this case, we can use the say locations function, which typically detect where the stops, where people stop in the trajectory data. And each of these pre-processing steps add further columns to this data frame-like structure, so that the user may have a very complete picture of what is happening in the data. Of course, there are functionalities to visualize trajectories and also flows. And one interesting functionality is that as the user use pre-processing techniques, there are some attributes that are added to the data structure that help the user remember what is the list of all the operations that have been applied on the data. Because typically in human mobility, after a while, you apply so many operations that you don't remember the order and which kind of parameters you used. These attributes help the user remember what are the operations used. Also, there are several statistics summarizing both collective and individual mobility. These are some examples, and they can be also used to replicate some papers, standard papers, human mobility. For example, in this case, one individual can compute the radius of duration and the k-radius, which are two measures to capture the overall mobility of the recurrent mobility of an individual. And then in this case, it's an example of how to replicate a study that we did several years ago. Finally, we also have models to generate synthetic data. In the case, one does not have any real data to work with. There are collective models, individual models. For example, collective models, one of those is the gravity model, very famous. Then can be in 2-3 line of code. One can fit a gravity model and generate some flows. These are, for example, a visualization of synthetic flows generated in a particular place, or one can use individual based mobility models to generate synthetic trajectories. In this case, you may see a visualization of a synthetic trajectory. And also we can use the metrics to visualize some characteristics of these synthetically generated trajectories. The last part is about privacy. So you know that human mobility is sensitive regarding privacy. And so there are also some functionalities to estimate what is the privacy risk related to the use of a particular mobility dataset with standard techniques of re-identification. New features are being added every month. In particular, now in the next version, there will be more processing and more efficient processing algorithms, a new spatial tessellation function, more models, and finally, we are also thinking about adding segregation models and routing algorithms to help people find, for example, paths on a particular road network. The library, fortunately, is increasing. The usage of the library is increasing day by day, and typically now we have almost 10,000 this month, a bit less actually, access to the library. So it's starting to be used more and more by the community. Thank you very much. These are some of the statistics of the MobiData data research infrastructure, and I will be very glad to answer your questions, if any. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luca. I think we have a time for a question or two from the audience that you can ask in the chat or in the Q&A part of the webinar. If not, of course, you can always keep your time and questions for the Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. All right. We have a question from Renaud de Lantier to Luca. About data, do you have source for traffic information?
Well, actually, there is not directly. I mean, the library allows with a particular module, the data module, to download standard mobility datasets, including eventually traffic datasets, and also the users, the developers, to propose some kind of public datasets to be uploaded on the library. So actually, the current version, since the data module is very new, there are no traffic data that can be used. But they can be added in next version also, and also being proposed by some developers if they want. So if you have some public traffic dataset that you want to propose, there is a way to do that. You can propose it, and the next version there will be this dataset available for downloading in the library.
Thank you very much, Luca. Renaud, we hope this answers your question. Should you have any further ones, please keep them for the Q&A session. So now we can move on to Marcel Romšić from the Reciprocity Project. Marcel, feel free to share your presentation.
Thank you all, and thank you for the opportunity to be here and hear these wonderful presentations and use cases about data. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, perfectly.
Yes, thank you. So we are a little bit lack of time, so I'm trying to be quick. So I'm Marcel Romšić from Zonecluster, and I'm be part of the Reciprocity project. This is a Horizon 2020 project funded by European Union, and its goal to create more livable cities by replicating smarter and cleaner technologies. So basically, our mission as Reflective Cities support Europe's efforts to transform cities into climate resilient, connecting the multimodal nodes for smart and clean mobility. And this project offers the opportunity to bring together governments, researchers, industry, and civil society to accelerate the process of scaling up and replicating tested innovative mobility concepts in urban and peri-urban areas. And these initiatives supports different replication projects in at least 20 cities. This is our goal, and these cities are vary in size and location in Europe. So why we want to this initiative? First of all, because we have huge challenges in the future regarding urbanization and climate change, which can be solved by digitalizations or digital technologies. And these days there are several developed idea or solution, but our key question is what is the best way to implement these smart city these solutions into the smart city strategies and community initiatives to get more act against the climate change and the urbanization's problems. So and how we try to solve this problem, we just implement the four-stage project management methodology to locate the best practices. The first part is that identify, where we just find the best use cases. The second is learn, and the third is accelerate. These are running in parallel. In the learn phases, we just examine what is the best of the best use cases, what we collected in the identify period, and later on the accelerate phase, we just try to find the best way to how we can replicate them. And in the final stage, in the share stage, we just try starting to share of the collected ideas, and we do this with our project partners. And in here you can see the idea of these four stages, four-stage methodology. In the first stage, as already told, we just collecting best practices by stakeholder mapping and creating mobility task forces, which related to local mobility webinars in 10 different countries. And after that, we just summarize it in a roadmap for application action plan document. After that, we just starting to capacity building and start organizing mobility missions in the phase of learn, parallel with webinars where we can share the collective best practices with different companies and different stakeholders of an urban mobility area. In the third phase, we just starting to the mobility accelerator program with the business model workshops and good practices collected in the founding and legal help desk. And the fourth part, we just start to share the all replicated replication worth ideas. our ecosystem, just in a quick look through, we just try to cover the quadruple helix stakeholders, the policymakers, the civil society, industry, and the academia in European level. And with the help of our project partners, we successfully do that because our partners came from the innovation, acceleration field, the mobility sector field, and the urban mobility planning field, as you can see. And we just concentrating our efforts in these selected countries where these partners came from, and later in the share phase we just expanding to the European level. Our benefits of reciprocity project is basically the special attention in the all population groups, as I previously mentioned. We just covered the quadruple helix stakeholders, and by replicating, as we replicating sustainable mobility solutions, the project will significantly contribute to the reduction of harmful transport-related CO2 emissions and air pollutants. And with cities, we can act in faster and more targeted manner, and the multi-level governance and transnational collaboration will be improved. The concept that we, as I already told, in the identify phase, we just identified 260 stakeholders with 47 use cases. There's best practices in the field of smart mobility solutions as data-related solutions, and we do it with 10 mobility workshops organized by these mobility task forces. Just two examples of what good practices collected. We just use this method from Budapest, this thing called hidden traffic model, which helps to the city planners and the mobility planners, transportation planners, to model their future concepts about how they want to change the transport, and they can modeling it with this use case, and later on they can use it for further development of the transport network. They doing that with this modeling, with collecting data from the mobility transport and road companies who just working on that area in Budapest. And the second part is from EKK car system, which is more like a mobility as a service solution in Budapest. This application just collect the data of the whole mobility public transport vehicle, and they share it with not just for the operator of itself, it's also share it with the users of the public transport users, and they can just follow their vehicle when they arrive and where they want to go. So what just comes next in the part of the project, in the learn phase, we will have the mobility assembly in Linz next year in March, and after that in May in Istanbul. And we just organizing webinars and capacity building workshops during the next year, and we also have matchmaking event on Horizon Europe course in the end of this month and the beginning of December. In the accelerator phase, we will have a mobility assembly in Brussels next week, and before I already mentioned it, we will have it in Linz in next year March. And in the share phase, we just creating a matchmaking tool and a knowledge center where we just put all the collected information there to share with stakeholders from the quadruple helix. And thank you for your attention. I try to be quick and simple in this matter. And if you have any questions, just ask me or write me an email.
Thank you very much, Marcel, for the presentation. Indeed, if you have any questions, we are now switching to the next part of the session, which is a general Q&A session. I will just share my screen in a second. So we do actually have a question from Manon Coin. Hi to Marcel. Hi, is there any challenge related to data in the solutions identified? So this one goes to Marcel.
Yeah, sorry, I just muted. Yes, in the related in data, we identified a challenge that it's hard to solve. I mean, if you want to solve any transport, public transport or any urban mobility problem by data, it's fine. You can do it in one location easily. I mean, easily you need a funding, you need investments. But if you want to replicate it and try to solve this problem in other cities, it's quite problematic. In one country, it's one thing, but different countries regarding regulations, it could be problematic. And regulations, changing regulations is a country level decision, and it's hard to act fast. So it could be a good challenge for replicating data solutions, data-related solutions.
Thank you very much, Marcel. We now have another question for you.
Yeah, this matchmaking dates, it will be next year, March in Linz, in Austria. But I don't know, Daniel, we have an opportunity to share our slides. And I will just put on the slides a link for where you can register if you want to be participant on this event.
Thank you very much. So Hector Ochoa Ortiz, hope that Marcel has answered your question, but of course the recording of this webinar will be shared with all of you, as well as the link towards the global presentation. I would like now, before going to the question made by Esther, to go back to question made by Guido Ancarani for Ismini and related to the Clean Air project. So Guido asked if the smart contracts are or could be registered on a blockchain network, and are you considering this opportunity? So Ismini, if you would like to answer this question.
Yes, indeed, the smart contracts are based on the model of smarter external e-contracts. So yes, most probably it will be based on blockchain, but we haven't decided yet which exactly technology, and we haven't investigated the cost that these transactions will take. So I cannot answer you in a more, let's say, specific way.
Thank you very much, Ismini. Now we have a question from Esther Perrin. She thanks you all for interesting presentations and asks if everyone or the ones that are in the topic can speak about the implications from the new EU regulations regarding Data Governance Act and Data Act on data sharing between actors to create new services in mobility.
Well, I can answer the data sharing contracts are taking into account the new Data Act because, yeah, it's necessary to having into account the act before proposing a template. So it's based on the Data Act actually. So the data sharing contract.
Thank you very much, Ismini. Maybe from also from other speakers, if you would like to give your opinion on implications from the new EU regulations.
I can try from my side, yes. Well, the question is rather complex because the regulations are always and still evolving. But that being said, on the side of MobiDataLab, we have a specific partner who wrote some specific deliverables on this question, which I would invite Esther maybe to consult on our website. These are the governance. So let me find the title exactly. There is legal regulatory data sharing gap analysis performed by our partner from the University of Leuven, and also the data governance assessment, which will be followed in putting the link to the publications here, which will be followed in the next year by updated versions. That being said, there is also this ongoing works on mobility data spaces, which are tightly related to this data governance aspect derived from the Data Act. So for us on MobiDataLab, we follow very closely the ongoing work on these data spaces, because we would like to integrate them into our architecture just to comply with the latest versions of this data space architecture, which complies with the Data Governance Act.
Thank you very much, Thierry. Also, Manon shared in the chat the concrete document that Thierry was referencing to. Luca, you would also like to add something regarding the topic?
Yeah, no, I would just like to add that, now these new, especially the Digital Data Act that is, will be in law very soon, it allows us to make research that were not possible before. In particular, while, now the companies are, let's say, obliged in some sense to provide APIs or some information for doing public research. For example, just to provide a practical example, I am working on some routing algorithms, and now the Digital Data Act make it easier to compare the routes, for example, provided by several recommender systems, while before the Digital Data Act, that was really much harder. So I think it's a good opportunity to improve our research, and especially research on human mobility.
Thank you very much, Luca. Esther, we hope that these resources and insights are valuable for you. So we will jump to another question that Johannes Lauer asked towards the beginning of the webinar, which I find really interesting to listen to all of your answers actually from speakers. So Johannes asked that at the beginning, we mentioned that data is the new gold, but also that recently there was a statement that data is the new plastic. So in regards to these statements, how would you see this in the context of mobility data, and in which statement would you see the mobility data better fit? So maybe whoever wants to start.
Well, if we do nothing with the data, then obviously it is garbage and more like a plastic. But this is the challenge. It's just like, we know that there are at least some organizations have a lot of data, and they don't know what to do with it. So it's just like a burden more than anything else for them at the moment. But on the other side, there are people with bright ideas, skills, data scientists, for instance, researchers which lack data, and which would really, they are striving to find some data just to to find and develop new services, and for which it would be gold, like it is. So the thing is, the answer is in the middle. As long as we're not connecting people together, and it's our aim in MobiDataLab, there will be these two very different perspectives on mobility data. But let's make it gold for everyone then.
Thank you very much, Thierry. Really a nice answer. Any of the other speakers, if you'd like to contribute to this discussion, is data the new plastic or the new gold?
Well, I totally agree with Thierry. It's time to break the silos of transport service providers, allow scientists and developers to use existing data, and also allow transport service providers to collaborate between them to provide better services. And that's the objective of CINER, to give a standardized way of making data sharing agreements. It's not gonna, it's not competing with existing solutions such as data clouds or travel companions. On the contrary, it tries to enhance them and to give them let's say, new opportunities of collaboration.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Ismini. Luca and Marcel, if you would like to add something. Okay, if not, oh, sorry.
Yeah, well, actually, I like this, new plastic, new gold dualism. Let me provide my perspective. Well, actually, it means, it means what we mean by plastic. So when plastic was invented, let's say, it seemed the real, solution to all our problems. And actually, plastic is very, 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 very useful. But we did not think about possible long-term consequences of plastic. That is, plastic is very useful, but at the end, it is making our oceans and our cities very, very dirty. Let's say, let me use this very simple term. So probably with data, and especially mobility data, and the use of mobility data and the algorithms that exploit it, we should think in this term, not just think about how useful they are now, but what can be the possible consequences of having or not having public data and using that data in a way or in the other in the future. So if data will be plastic or gold, probably we will know it in several years, not now, as we knew that plastic was also bad after several years that we started using it, basically. This is my bit of information.
Thank you very much, Luca, for the nice explanation of the metaphor. Manon in the chat actually also enjoys the comparison, says it is very interesting, and I'm happy that we are having this discussion as well. Of course, if any of other participants or even speakers have questions regarding each other's presentations, or any question in general from the public, feel free to write it down in the chat or in the Q&A session. I will move to the next slide just in case, so people can have actually access to your contacts. As for example, Ismini said that she is interested to examine the usage of an existing and tested solution that Guido mentioned. So Guido, feel free to reach out to Ismini, but of course every other person as well. Here also you have contacts from other speakers in case you found their solutions and methodologies relevant. Thierry, if you would like to
yes, just added something to the chat, because I just heard about the psychic mobility privacy module by Luca. I was mentioning the work of our University of Tarragona about the MobiDataLab anonymization with these different methods. I think it would be interesting to explore possible convergence if any is possible. So when we deal with open source, it's always interesting to see. But we can discuss this later. I mean.
Thank you very much, Thierry. Any other questions from the audience? If not, then we can slowly close this quite fruitful webinar. And of course, we will be sharing this presentation and the webinar recording with all the registered participants. So once again, I would like to thank to Thierry, Ismini, Luca, and Marcel for insightful presentations. It was amazing to hear more about data-driven technology solutions, but also methodologies that aim to replicate these kind of solutions and to amplify their impact on the European soil. So thank you, everyone, and thanks everyone also for joining. Here you have contacts of speakers, but also you have contacts of my colleague Diana and myself that have organized this webinar together with the whole MobiData Lab consortium, and that were supported by the senior, so Big Data++ and the Reciprocity project. So thank you very much for joining. Of course, feel free to check out the websites of all the projects, follow social media, and sign up to newsletters. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
And we may stop recording the session.